Hello, everyone, and welcome to another week of Core Balance Coaching on the road. I am coming to you from a little town called Tonopah, Nevada, middle of nowhere, and we're driving through Nevada on our way back home to California. So we've been on the road for about a week and a half, and just wanted to, be able to show up and answer some questions for you guys. And I also thought I'd share some of the strategies I've been using because I'm driving across the country for several days each way, and it takes a toll on my body. So I'm primarily doing the driving. My wife is with our newborn, so I've noticed that the biggest effect on my body is on my right leg, my gas and brake pedal leg, and so one of the strategies I've been using is I use the cruise control whenever it's safe, whenever I can. You're not supposed to use it, if it's raining, or definitely not like on a curvy road or in heavy traffic. But when I use the cruise control, I'll do different things with my legs. I'll try, crossing my legs or just changing the position. As you may know, one of my beliefs is that variety is one of the healthiest things for the body. So it's just one of the strategies I try to use. And not only that, but I also change my seat position. So I'll shift my seat forward, I'll shift it back, and whatever settings you have on your seat, you can just try changing it up, especially for long drives. I wouldn't do that for short drives, but yesterday we probably drove like, I don't know, 6 hours. And so, yeah, definitely. So that's while driving, but I think the most beneficial thing that I do to kind of counterbalance the negative effects of driving is when we're not driving. So, uh, getting out of the car frequently, and whenever I do, I'm moving. If my wife has to breastfeed, I will definitely be going for a walk or even just exploring the area. The other day we were in the middle of Utah and it was like nothing. It was just cow pastures, but I just walked and looked, and there was not a whole lot to look at, but just look at the ground looking for little critters or whatever. And then I got a little warmed up. I started doing some uh, kind of like plyometric kind of hopping through over these. It's like sagebrush, little low ground cover plants, and that felt really good for my body. So, getting weird basically is one of the things I do. I don't care if if there's other people around. In that case, there wasn't. But if I'm at a gas station, I will stretch off of the top of my. We have a minivan, but whatever. Whatever you drive, you can use the roof of your car. We happen to have roof racks, so just grabbing onto those and doing some kind of like stretching my mid back and getting that thoracic spine mobility. Definitely help a lot. Whenever I can find a good place to do a deep squat, if your SI joint is not flared up, deep squats can be really helpful. So just to kind of sit in that position and breathe and be able to just let those back muscles release. And then even in situations where we have to stop and get food. So the other night we went to a restaurant and they had outside seating, and some of the tables are like bar height tables. I will just stand at the tables because they're bar height, and I will stand and eat my dinner. And I kind of do that a lot, but definitely if we're on a long road trip, that's something I recommend because a lot of times I notice people will have a long drive, they get out of the car, and then they go sit somewhere and eat. And it's like, well, shoot, that's not really taking a break from driving. You're still sitting. So if you're not in the car and you don't have to be sitting, don't sit. Walk around, eat standing up. If you're visiting with friends and they're sitting at a table, I'll just stand back off the table a little bit and chat and be moving my body, doing some things. And it's weird, but also I feel like people kind of find it interesting and even maybe almost a little respectable. So I encourage you to do that. And then probably the most helpful thing of all in critical times when it's like, wow, my back is not feeling good or my body overall is just hurting and stiff, is the breathing. So what we teach in the program, day zero, the very first thing, breathing into the back and learning how to do that, not just for a minute or two, but on a more longer term timeline, sending the breath into the low back. It really creates that decompression in the discs. So that's a go-to for me. Sometimes I turn it up, I turn up the intensity, and I have like stronger engagement in my abdominals, and I'm sending that breath back with more force, and that creates even more decompression. It's very subtle, but it's very powerful. And I'll do that on airplanes as well. But other times I just try to do it at a low level constantly for as long as I can. It's like meditation, for as long as you can go. So if there's anything else that pops up that I think of, I'll share with you, but those are some of my main strategies. Definitely changing the seat position. I don't use a back support, but if I did, or if I had one, I would put that in for a little bit, take it out for a little bit, put it back in, and that's more variety, right? Because keeping it in there the whole time is just the same repetitive trauma as not having it there at all. It's the repetitive trauma, the vibration, the bumps of your spine being in the same exact position for so long. That's not good. So we change it up. Okay. All right. So I have the Student Hub Student of the Week to announce, and that is Julia Mizels. We just want to say thank you for reading the comments below the lessons and the questions and answers in every lesson, and for sharing your knowledge that you've learned in the Student Hub, as well as kind of sharing how you have found this to be modeled after human and infant development, and that's exactly what it is. So just thank you for sharing in the Student Hub and for doing the work to find your answers. That's what we hope for. So congratulations, you are the Student Hub Student of the Week. And so we're going to add a month to your membership, and you have to do nothing. We'll add it from the back end. So congratulations and thank you, Julia. So let's get into the questions, and we have our first question from Janice. And I'm just going to go ahead and read. It's a little bit longer, but I'm going to go ahead and read it to you. So it says, will this program help with ischiofemoral impingement? For anybody that's wondering, it's in the hip. Impingement is kind of like pinching, and it's in the back of the hip. So it's a specific type of impingement of the hip. It's kind of a newer diagnosis. We're starting to see it more and more often. So will it help with that? So she has a little background. She says, hers was recently diagnosed, and it's not a result of trauma or a birth defect, which is what they tend to believe in the medical system, that this is caused by either trauma or a birth defect. And she says it's neither. So it came on gradually, and there was no trauma or congenital abnormality associated with it. So, which I believe is very possible. Okay, so impingement of the hip happens when the joint is not congruent. So we have a congruent hip. It's the ball and socket is lined up perfectly, and it can come out and be less congruent in any direction. And so if that is in the posterior direction, then there's a narrowing of space between the head of the femur and the pelvis, the socket, the acetabulum. And it would pinch a little bit different tissues than if it was slid forward to the front of the joint. So in this case, it tends to pinch the quadratus femoris muscle, and also sometimes the sciatic nerve. And I believe that is happening in her case for both of those structures. So I don't really have kind of empirical evidence for you that the program works, but I do believe it would work, because I think that this impingement is associated with tight hip flexors. It's kind of under, it makes sense to me that it's under the same umbrella of this monster of muscle imbalances that we are fighting against. And so when you have a global imbalance of your body, of muscle imbalances, any number of things can result. It could actually result in knee pain or hip pain or lower back pain or neck pain. And if you were to single it out to just lower back pain, which is probably the most common, it could result in herniated disc or stenosis or spondylolisthesis. And it's really just, there's so many other factors, like infinite other factors that would lead to how you live your lifestyle, what you're doing regularly, that something's going to break down if the body is not operating in its optimal state. You know, if there are joints that are incongruent, whatever's going to break is the weakest link, and that's related to all these other factors. But as a human species, and there's 8 billion of us now, there are patterns. And this, I believe this falls into the pattern that the program treats. And so that's the long answer, is I do believe that this program will help to open up those hips and hip flexors and allow the joint to sit more congruently. And I also don't have, like I said, I don't have empirical evidence, meaning I don't have any past students that I know about with this condition, especially that didn't happen from a trauma or there's not a lot of cases recorded of people. I'm sure that's happened a lot, but not a lot of cases where people got this type of impingement gradually. So only one way to find out. So that's, I would just say, give it a shot and see if it helps. And if you feel that it's helping your body, then I would say keep going. So that's my answer for you, Janice. And we have another question from Jennifer Neef. So this one I'm going to read to you as well. She says her doctor, first she said that she shared with her doctor that what she's been doing in the program, and he kind of justified it as that she's doing the right things and that he was impressed with her knowledge, and she shared some gratitude about that. So thank you for sharing that, Jennifer. And the doctor asked her to start learning about upper cross posture syndrome and said that they're going to be talking about that. So she wanted to hear my thoughts about that, and so yeah, I'll share. So upper cross is part of the same monster that I refer to as this global imbalance, this pattern that we see, as a very common pattern in the 8 billion people population, and is one of the, the most common postural patterns that we see. If it's not good posture, it kind of falls into one direction most often, and that is the pattern that Vladimir Yonda labeled crossed posture syndrome, and that's composed of upper cross and lower cross. Lower cross is more closely related in physical distance to the lower back pain, but upper cross, which is more of the upper body, can have just as much of an influence on the lower back as lower cross posture. So it seems like in the program we're more addressing lower cross posture, which is tight hip flexors, tight lower back muscles, and then kind of weak or inhibited abdominals and glutes. Well, upper cross posture is the same cross but in upper body. So the tight muscles would be the back of the neck muscles, upper traps and posterior neck muscles, and then the chest muscles that kind of pull our shoulders forward. And so you start to look a little bit like this, and that's that rounded posture with the forward head posture. And then the weak or inhibited muscles would be just the opposite. So the anterior neck muscles that can kind of keep it like this. They kind of get weak and lengthened and stretched out. And then the upper back muscles, the thoracic muscles just below the posterior neck muscles, that get super tight. So that is that is something that we are also addressing in the program, kind of subtly, especially with the upper front anchor. That is activating and kind of strengthening those upper back muscles that hold you open so we have those other anchors that prevent compensation, because one of the most common compensations for upper cross is military posture, where you just kind of and you flare your rib cage in the front, and it's compensating into the lower back, causing more lower back stress and predictably pain. So if you have upper cross posture, yes, the program will be addressing it, and it's really important that you pay attention to all the anchors, because this is the hardest thing about getting out of cross posture is the muscles are like tight, weak, and it's so hard to isolate training in between two tight muscles to a weak muscle without just getting compensation by those tight muscles that are already compensating in your life to make up for the weak muscle right in between. And so the anchors kind of have this check and balance for the body. They help the body to, I'm not going to take credit for it. It was just mimicking how an infant develops. And an infant starts life with cross posture syndrome. They're in the fetal position, which is cross posture syndrome. It's lower cross and upper cross. And then they gradually open up, and the way that they do that is through their interactions with the floor and their body and gravity. And so we just mimic that, and so we learn from nature or God or whatever you believe in is the creation of this perfect posture that we developed by the age of 4. So those are my thoughts. It's not worth getting too deep into all the different muscles and names and try to dissect them, because what I found is the deeper you go, the more you zoom in, the harder it is to see the full picture. And the full picture is a 4-year-old child going from a baby to a 4-year-old child, and they don't know the names of the muscles. They don't know all this science and stuff. They just do, and they feel, and they have intention. The intention is to get up off the ground and walk around and run around, and so they do that in a really healthy way. So those are my thoughts to Jennifer, and thank you for the kind words as well. So the next one is from Andrea, and she has a little background information, so I'll go ahead and read that for you. It says, so I've progressed through modules, but feel like I have to keep going back to the beginning. First, I will say that's not uncommon, and actually I love when people go back to the beginning, and hopefully you pick up new information and new feelings, enhance the relationship with your body and your core each time you do that, and have a little breakthrough. And that's the goal, and oftentimes I think that does happen. She says, because it's my left SI joint that is an issue, and the left QL is almost always tight. And that causes the ligament or maybe multifidi to be tight, and so it always feels stiff on that side. So left side stiffness and left SI joint pain. Okay, so that makes sense. The SI joint pain is often not, the SI joint on the painful side is often not too stiff, it's often too hypermobile, and that's where the pain comes from. It's the joint moving more than it should and friction in that joint. But it's hypermobile because oftentimes what's right next to that joint is too much stiffness, not moving enough. So that left side of your back, I'm holding my left hand, but it probably looks like the right to you guys, is stiff here, and so the SI joint below has to move too much to make up for this area that's not moving. And probably your left hip, I would guess, is also a little stiff, most likely, but not necessarily. And so one of the things that we would want to do is improve the mobility of the areas above and below that left hypermobile, probably hypermobile or unstable SI joint. So the left QL is a tough one because the lower back is often tightening up because it's already moving too much. So I would focus more on the left hip and also the thoracic spine, which is what we start to do, in module 2, module 3, and later in the program. The hips are a big focus later in the program, so that might be for you, Andrea, kind of like a key to unlocking this cycle that you're going through. So I might consider going farther through the program, and then, if you feel like once you've gotten through the program, you need to review the beginning stuff, then you can go ahead and do that. But I wouldn't allow not making progress with my pain to stop me from progressing through the program if I'm understanding the concepts and functionally able to perform the movements and the connections. So if you can do it functionally and you got it, you've grasped the concepts in your mind, go ahead and keep going forward, even if the pain is not progressing or you're not making progress with the pain. And that's because there may be something later in the program that we need to unlock, hopefully, and that it seems like it would be the hips for you. So you mentioned the multifidi being tight. That's not typically a problem. Multifidi tend to become inhibited, and so it would most likely be the QL is a protective muscle, the hip flexor a protective muscle. I would take a look at the difference between your two hips. If you check out the mobility in your right hip versus your left hip, you might find that your right hip is more mobile than your left hip. And if that's the case, that's an imbalance. And that's what this is all about, right? Returning your body back to balance. We would want to work on increasing the mobility of your left hip. And that's not just passive stretching. In the program, we talk a little bit about that and introduce some active movements, some hip mobility and control, so that you learn how to have control over that hip in the new range of motion. So that's what I'd be looking at, is that left hip. And also in your life, the things that are promoting the problem or reinforcing the problem. Okay, what are you doing that's causing you pain? Do you drive a lot? Are you sitting too much? Or do you always sit one way or cross your legs in one way or stand one way, leaning onto one side? Pay attention, and those are things that often, if you can remove or do the opposite of, stand on the other side or sit the other way for a little while to kind of counterbalance, then that can be a big breakthrough as well. So hopefully that helps for you. That is all the questions for today. And thank you all for committing to your bodies and being here. And if you're watching this, leaning in and trying to educate yourself. And the more you lean in, the more I lean back in. So just want to express my gratitude. And next week we will be back on the normal schedule. So I'll be hopefully doing a live stream, and look forward to that. So until then, get down on the floor and connect to your core. All right, take care, everyone.